I'm going to just cover from my perspective, dealing with a lot of executives on the ground, and the perspective of people in ASEAN implementing data protection, especially with specific reference to GDPR, right? So the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of businesses in ASEAN focus on digital transformation, and there were a lot of funding given by the government. And with that, a lot of them went digital, obviously. So what's happening right now, the new capabilities, they need to adapt it to meet the data protection requirements. Many of them, that was the secondary consideration, right? AI is making headlines in the marketplace. It's already adopted internally, whether officially or unofficially, just like the discussions we've had this last 2 days. So obviously, ethical, responsible use of AI is not top of mind at the business level. But regulators in China, Singapore, and Thailand already have established some guidelines. Well, Thailand actually has set up a unit to look at it as well, right? So it's not something to be ignored. And as we go back, we could be talking to a number of business users as well as regulators exactly on this issue. Practical approach mindset, that is the mindset of the executives in ASEAN, right? There are two types. There's MNCs who are from Europe, who are present there, or Asian businesses who want to do business with with MNCs, especially European-based. The struggle is how do they comply with GDPR and also with the respective data protection law, okay? So the executives, most of them actually want to know how do we comply with the local one and conform or what's applicable to GDPR. So that's why dashboarding is quite important. I had conversation with some of you here, and that is the practical mindset because the ROI of this effort is questionable for a lot of executives. Next, relative low organization executive priority on data protection. In terms of education, just now, even Commissioner Michael are talking about, this thing not being well known, and in the Philippines at the same time. The regulators there do a lot of outreach. We are one of the speakers for the Singapore regulator, and they do a lot of initiatives at the trade associations and speeches, and they also fund training, right? So that's effort by the regulators for outreach. E-learning is also a viable channel, and that's also being farmed out by the regulators as well, right? Now, the tussle for business objectives versus compliant objectives. I think Kevin has mentioned about paper compliance. This term actually was coined by Liboro, right? The regulator from the Philippines, they say, oh, the worst nightmare they can have is actually to meet DPO with paper compliance, right? So the regulators there underline the importance of operational compliance versus paper compliance, because when they investigate, they want to see hard evidence of operational compliance. Now in Singapore, for example, they moved the new principles of accountability. They actually also have stated the standard expected of a data protection management program. Philippines, Singapore has principles outlined, right, with baseline competency of framework for even the DPO. And in these two countries, they've issued also certifications. The other countries are now also propagating frameworks for DPO competency. In Singapore, there's actually 10 levels of competency for a DPO, okay? And we actually are the ones who did the curriculum for the Singapore practitioner certification for that as well. So no less effort from the regulators, but a lot of this is about propagating what standards they need, but they also back it up in terms of initiatives that people can take on, right? Then the high rates of double hatting in role on DPO. Now the interesting thing is that in ASEAN, the DPO is not a dedicated role. Many of them are double-hatted, whether they're HR, IT, and there's this no compunction of a conflict of interest role. It's not independent, okay? But because they're double-hatted, the question is the person equipped to do the job, right? So there needs to be a baseline competency and certification for DPO, so which is why I said Singapore have issued that, Philippines has issued that, the other countries are now issuing guidelines or even framework for DPO competency. So if you're working with people there or your operations there, you may want to question whether it's also in place, right? Then due diligence. Out of the COVID, number of the due diligence taken on by firms was that because we can't visit on site, they have actually issued standards-based compliance or standards-based evidence of your compliance to data protection. So in Singapore, for example, the data protection trust mark is one standard that's specified in number of tenders, especially when you work with government. Okay? ISO 27701 is referred to from the Philippines regulators as also a certification by companies to have a level of assurance of operational compliance. Okay? So that's something you want to be aware of. Now, in summary, from my colleagues who have presented, the key features, 6 key features across 8 countries. To summarize this, right? I know the photograph may not get all the details, but we'll be sending this to you at the end of today. That'd be good, yeah? And so you'll get this as well. So we purposely have put it like that so you can see it across the 6 key features.